NASCAR and its teams remain embroiled in a years-long fight over an expansion of the franchise structure at the core of the industry. The teams want a larger slice of the financial pie, a seat at the bargaining table, and charters, which guarantee their place in any Cup Series race and consequently a portion of the prize, to be permanent. And once again, 23XI Racing has taken the spotlight as the fight over a charter is still on, with only 6 races left to go in 2024. And what would it mean for NASCAR if Reddick were to win the regular season and become the Cup champion in 6 weeks' time, only for him to be left out of charter in 2025 due to NASCAR's ongoing battle with 23XI? Surely this can't happen, right? Every proposition submitted to the teams was considered undesirable. Polk, who helped Jordan become one of the world's most known personalities, is the unofficial head of the team Resistance, whose charters are slated to expire at the end of this year. NASCAR had presented the teams with a fresh proposition, and Polk was clearly unimpressed. He pinned a sheet of paper to the back of his shirt that read, "Please don't ask me about my charter. I don't want to disparage NASCAR and lose it." Hamlin stated that Polk wore the sign out of frustration, and that significant sacrifices will be required to bring the teams and NASCAR closer to an agreement. "One side will have to wake up and be reasonable, that's all," he said. When asked which side needs to offer givebacks, Hamlin was blunt. "Not ours." In his weekly podcast, Hamlin mentioned that NASCAR's latest proposal includes an anti-disparagement language. "They do not want you speaking negatively. That's a new add to the charter agreement," Hamlin said on his podcast. "NASCAR's got their stance and the teams have theirs. We'll just see where this goes the next few weeks." The most recent charters were signed in 2015 and will run until the end of the year, when the existing television packages expire. Negotiations have been continuing for more than 2 years, with teams willing to let NASCAR negotiate a new media package first so they know how much money will be flowing. "I think for a very, very long time, NASCAR has said this is our family business, and if you don't like it, you don't have to participate," according to Hamlin. "I think the world has changed since that mentality was established a long, long time ago by Bill France Sr., and while I certainly respect everything they have built, and that they have done a good job, at a certain point, you have to update your thinking, or else you will hold the sport back." Frustration keeps growing at 23XI. Racing as a solution seems to still be far off. Hamlin is the only driver owner who has agreed to talk publicly about the conflict. Brad Keselowski is a part owner of RFK Racing, but team executive Steve Newmark handles the negotiations. Justin Marks of Trackhouse Racing is one of the new crop of younger drivers, but it is usually Hamlin who handles all the questions. Hamlin believes NASCAR purposefully delayed its feet in discussions so that smaller teams would feel pressured to sign anything NASCAR put in front of them. "There's probably a handful of teams that are just happy to take any deal that they can get, and there's others with some business sense that says this is unreasonable," Hamlin said. "So the larger teams are pushing back. As NASCAR prepares footage for a second season on Netflix, teams have made it plain that they would not provide permission to use pictures or likenesses of its brands without a charter agreement." NASCAR, however, has stated that teams are not permitted to utilize its trademark for advertising purposes. As Hamlin pointed out, right now, NASCAR owns this and teams own that, and we compete for the same sponsors. "All we do is compete against each other instead of locking arms and growing the sport together," he said. "In my opinion, until we do that, we are just going to continue spinning our tires." So, what happens next? Could we really see 23XI leave the sport? Nobody really knows what will happen when the charters expire at the end of the year. Hamlin questioned how NASCAR could legally reclaim a charter from a team that had not only acquired it, but also satisfied all of the performance standards to keep it for the duration of the present contracts. He believes NASCAR is in for a surprise if it begins snatching charters and enters 2025 without an agreement. "I think it's more just a frustration of a lack of acknowledgement that the teams have built this sport. Rick, Hendrick and Joe Gibbs putting superstars on the racetrack, that is what has built the sport," Hamlin said. "Fans do not come to see cars going around in circles. If they would, then we would sell out ARCA races, but they don't. They come to sell out on Sunday to watch Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson and Kyle Busch. So, who provides them the cars? And that's the teams. Who spends the money? That's the teams. Whose sponsors go buy a suite? That's the teams. Whose sponsors activate in their midways? That's the teams," he said. "That's the tough part, that they just don't value us." So for now, only 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports remain to have not signed NASCAR's new charter deal. Arguments between the two parties have been extensively described. Michael Jordan and his team are requesting fair negotiating grounds, but NASCAR does not want to relinquish control of the sport. Although this disobedience began as a unified front, with all Cup teams standing fast against NASCAR. However, that resistance was shattered just before the playoffs began. Justin Marks and Trackhouse Racing, who had pushed for a better possibility, joined the other teams in signing the agreement. He even acknowledged the situation that forced him to take this call, stating, "For Trackhouse, you know I look at it, and we didn't get everything we wanted, but we got something we wanted." In summary, the team owner was willing to make a deal or compromise to continue in the sport. However, NASCAR was unable to strong-arm 2311 and FRM, and Justin Marks admires their tenacity. The charter negotiations have taken significantly longer than anticipated. With the year 2024 drawing to an end, NASCAR sought to settle the business. After going back and forth without finding a solution, their patience grew thin, and they ultimately issued an ultimatum to the teams: either sign the arrangement or risk losing their charters. Now, a team owner like Justin Marks, who has made significant investments in the industry since 2021, was not going to take chances on his team's existence. There are some elements that leave things to be desired for sure. NASCAR's got a lot of power, a lot of influence, and they definitely have come out way in things. But I still feel like the sport is in about a good spot now, as it's probably ever been, certainly in my lifetime. And with so much competition in the landscape for consumers and viewership, I think NASCAR is performing really well, Mark stated. Meanwhile, he offered his thoughts on 2311 Racing and FRM's choice not to sign the charter agreement. As far as the other two, I certainly admire their conviction. I certainly admire their willingness to stand up for what they're fighting for. What they believe in, I don't know where it goes. I don't know what comes out of it, because we wake up and we're going to prepare cars for the Daytona 500. So we'll see how that goes, he added. The relationship between NASCAR and 2311 Racing is strained. However, the possibility of reaching an agreement between the two parties is not gone. 2311 Racing intends to compete in 2025, whether or not the charter agreement is in place. But how is this possible? The race team is more than just a collection of drivers and team owners. The team is comprised of a large number of personnel, crew, engineers, and sponsors. The 2311 Racing camp and its sponsors were shrouded in uncertainty due to a lack of clarification or confirmation. While there are reports that NASCAR and 2311 Racing would go to court to settle matters legally, Hamlin recently made an unexpected comment. "We've said we plan on racing next year no matter what, and we're sticking to that." He mentioned this before the Bristol race. Furthermore, the team extended the contract of one of its drivers, Bubba Wallace, bolstering Hamlin's assertion of the organization's continuing participation in the sport. It is not necessary for a team to obtain a charter to compete in a NASCAR race, but this scenario is not in the team's best interests due to the financial drain. Aside from losing a guaranteed slot on the grid, the team will be unable to generate cash from the TV arrangement, and NASCAR has secured a $7.7 billion deal for the next 7 years. 2311 Racing has also made headlines for adding a third charter, as well as the launch of their brand new racing shop, Airspeed. So it's fair to assume that they're anticipated to strike an agreement with NASCAR on the charter deal. What do you think? Will they eventually give in to NASCAR's demands? Or will they hold out until the very last second? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below.